All right, we are recording. Welcome to departmental scholarship training. We are definitely in the process of refining this process over the last couple of years, and Daniel has been very, very instrumental in this. So I'm going to hand it off to Daniel. Go ahead.
Thanks, Molly. I feel like we're getting a bit of like inception because we're recording a recording, but it'll work. We did a scholarship training for the departments in the middle of January this year. It was our second time of doing this for the different department assistants and department chairs. Last year's was, or the previous one, the first one was in person naturally, but this one we did virtually, and it went pretty well as well. And so rather than reinvent the wheel, that was recorded. So I'm gonna go ahead and share that presentation. So I will skip around a little bit because there's a whole section from Jim Burgum in accounting that doesn't necessarily relate to us on the advisor and FA side, but the rest of it is really great information from our team and from University Advancements. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And this is where we all cross our fingers and hope that the sound comes through when I do this. Go ahead and make this full screen. And it should share sound because we've done that in Zoom presentations before. So let's find out.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the second annual scholarship awarding meeting. I know there are a few people that are still jumping on the call, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We are recording this, so we will email out the recording to everyone when we're done. So my name is Christina Gardner. I'm the Executive Director of Philanthropy Research and Strategy, and I have a few members of the University Advancement team on the call today. So we have William Burfitt, our Executive Director of Annual Giving, Rachel Ellis, our Director of Advancement Services, and Sarah Binsfield, our Stewardship Specialist. And we have partnered, University Advancement has partnered with Student Financial Services and Accounting to put this meeting together. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jamie Ashe for a moment to introduce herself and her team.
Thanks, Christina. Hi, I'm Jamie Ashe, and I am the Director of Financial Aid here at Point Loma. And I also have some members of my team joining us, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. We have Daniel Reed, who is the Associate Director of Financial Aid. We also have Eva Wilson, who is the Financial Aid Specialist. We have Marlon DeMesa, who is our Administrative Financial Aid Officer. And we have Molly Porter, who is the Senior Director of Student Financial Services. And then we also have, not in my direct department, but we work very closely with him, is Jim Burgum, who is in the accounting office, and his title is Director of Financial Reporting and Tax. So I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to partnering with you and making sure that we are getting students the resources they need to be successful here. So with that, I'll give it back to Christina.
Thanks, Jamie. So yeah, our goal in gathering together this morning is ultimately just to help our students and just help them be able to receive these scholarships that have been so generously donated by many faithful PLNU supporters. So we want to partner with you and be a resource for you and answer any questions you may have with, again, the ultimate goal of just helping our students and being able to award these scholarships. So today we're going to walk through the awarding process and timelines. We're going to hear a bit about the workday side of things, as well as the process with Google Sheets. And then we're also going to hear a bit about University Advancement's role and how donors play a part in the whole picture here. So we do ask that if you have questions throughout the presentations that you submit them in the chat, and we will have a time of Q&A at the end. Also, we ask that you keep your microphone muted throughout the presentations. And lastly, understand that the speaker view is the best view to see this in. So at the top right of your screen, if you want to click on view and make sure you're on speaker view, that's a preferred way. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump right into the presentations.
Hello, my name is Daniel Newell. I'm Associate Director of Financial Aid. Thank you for joining us today. I get to talk about the different steps of our awarding process for endowed and department scholarships. So let me share my screen here so that we can run through these steps. First one I would like to talk about is the self-serve reports listed in Workday. Jim Burgum from accounting will go over in detail how to access those reports and make sure that you have access to the ones that impact your department. But that is a great way to go in, see what scholarships that you have available to your department with your access, see the totals and the budgets of those screens, and at any time be able to go back and reference that total. Jim in accounting will look into that specifically, and if you need any assistance on gaining access to those or questions on the timing of those balances, Jim will be a great one to answer those questions. Those reports really inform the Google Sheets. So there are Google Sheets that are set up for every department, so every area that has these types of scholarships for awarding. Department assistants will gain access and then invites to those department Google Sheets in order to help communicate the scholarship recipients as determined by your departments. So it's a great way to put in the student's information to tell us in financial aid what amounts you would like the student to receive, and even to give any sort of special instructions on that, such as if there is a reason to have all of that amount in a single semester, or if there's not a restriction to time for full-time enrollment status. Great place to indicate that on a per student basis. Those by Marlon DeMesa, and you'll hear from her soon as well about what each of that looks like and the best ways to use that for communication with our office. Excuse me. We use those to do eligibility checks, and it's while you do have access to each of the contracts for each of these awards that your department has authority over managing, you have access to those contracts. But for your convenience, within that Google Sheet, there are different tabs that tell you the overall amount that you could get from the Workday reports, that tell you the specific eligibility criteria for each of the awards, as is listed out in those contracts. So it's a helpful point of reference just to ensure that as you're collecting your applications from students, that you are asking all the needed questions to qualify them for those eligibility criteria, as well as once you are selecting recipients to go in and double check that those students do meet those eligibility criteria. Once we receive that information from you via the Google Sheets, Marlon DeMesa and Eva Wilson primarily are the ones to review that information, double check to make sure that that the eligibility criteria are met, are considered and met for each of those that are selected. That's also a great place to be communicating lists back and forth for scholarships that may have a need-based criteria or something that is that has either a requirement or a recommendation to award to high need students. We in financial aid have a way to determine what that looks like, whereas that may not be information that the student would either readily divulge or that you would have easy access to in your awarding criteria. So there are several departments that we run this back and forth with to show if there's a high need student or a low or no need student to assist you with your decisions. So those sheets are also great ways to do that kind of eligibility check. And the department selection, each of the departments, you have a lot of flexibility and authority of getting that application in from the student, how you market that, how you announce that, how you determine whether you're using specific applications or looking at the entire department, all of the students within that department. So that selection process is really up to you to manage. We'll talk a little bit about the preferred timelines from our office just because of how it impacts other aid. But that selection process is something that each department manages individually. There may be departments that have done this for longer or have some best practices to share amongst each other. That could be a great opportunity to pair up with another department assistant to see how their process works. That is something that can and does differ between departments. As we receive different sheets and these updates, often many departments that have quite a few awards on these shared sheets. So it can be 50, 60, 100 different students with different amounts that need to be then added on. It does take some time for the financial aid department to add those on to student awards. There is some variety within that as well, whether the department likes to be the one to notify the student first, whether that's in some sort of banquet or formal recognition or specific email. There's some variety. So if that's something that applies to you, make sure to communicate that to us if you would like to be the first one to indicate to the students that they are a recipient of one of these endowed or department scholarships. As far as the timelines go, we do prioritize kind of a first come, first serve. So the first department that submits a list to financial aid, we start working on that first, and we continue to go through as they are received. There are often questions about some of the specific award recipients. So whether there's a specific piece of eligibility that a student may or may not receive, or some other type of uniqueness that came from one of the student selections, we will put those questions into that Google Sheet to help communicate that back to the department. And that's a good way to go back and forth about that kind of information. So as one thing that Marlon will likely mention in her presentation on the Google Sheet specifically, you are able to set up alerts on a Google Sheet to let you know when changes have been made on that sheet. So as we update an award, that can be a nice thing for you to know that that's happening. And as these kind of questions come on, that's certainly a good thing for you to know that is happening. We throw a question into that Google Sheet that requires some sort of answer. We will reach out as well to department assistants as needed, but that can be a great way to have a real quick turnaround on the information back and forth by using that existing communication tool of the Google Sheets. So as updates continue throughout the year, we do continue to have, perhaps as a student is enrolled in the spring or withdraws in the spring or has some sort of other enrollment change in an upcoming semester, there may be some additional information we would want from you to see what to do with the scholarship information. And as new students come in, you will have new awards. Things do tend to move around a little bit. So Google Sheets are a great way to show those updates as well. Also, the overall sections and different portions of the awarding process. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the timeline and the hopeful timeline for how each of these start by talking about the traditional undergraduate timelines and what works best for the traditional calendar. Of course, we're assuming we're back to having a fairly standard calendar for the upcoming year. It's always hard to know what the future will bring, but we anticipate being back into a more standard swing of things. So with that, bills are due for traditional undergraduates in the upcoming fall. The bills are due on August 2nd, and for fall starts and for fall spring students in general. So the bill for the fall is due on the 2nd, and the bill for the spring being published is due on January 3rd. So having that in mind, it is helpful to know that information about who's getting any sort of outside scholarships, as well as endowed and department scholarships, who's getting any scholarships outside of what we are already aware of in the financial aid office, and what the student is already aware of. It's helpful to know that ahead of time, before the semester starts, so that they can plan well if they need to take out additional loans, if they're looking at a significant payment plan for their family to put together. If they have all of the information up front, it is helpful for their planning. So that is our initial due dates. Late fees, which do apply to a percentage of any unmet or unpaid balance. Late fees end up coming up in September for the fall and in February for the spring. So there is a bit of grace between when we publish as our due date versus when there's actually a fee charged on remaining balances. The last hammer, really, as far as the financial goes, is holds. So a financial hold prevents registration for the following semester. So it is a hard stop for a student who owes a balance. And those go on in October and March. Given that information, you can see why it would be helpful to have anything about a scholarship, these endowed and department scholarships, to be in place well before these dates come along, so that the student can feel secure in the funding that they have. Often, it is possible that as we get awards later on throughout the year, or even past a semester, which has happened on occasion, that we're working with other aid that the student has needed to pull together, whether that's a large private loan or a parent loan or a big payment plan that they had to work through. There may have been late fees that have already been assessed. So if we get a scholarship after the fact, we'll certainly add it on for the student. We want to make sure that they receive the scholarship funds as you have designated for them. We'll certainly do that, but it's not going to, more likely than not, it's not going to create a situation where we would remove a late fee of a balance because they had a balance at that point in time. So that's important to know. It's also possible that there are other kind of need-based grants that would need to be adjusted after the fact. So, which is never a great conversation to have with students, that yes, they may be getting more aid from a department, but now they're getting less aid from one of these other types of institutional funds. So it's more of an offset rather than addition, which is not a great message or a great conversation to have with a student family who's excited about this new aid that they can receive, only to see that it could potentially reduce other types of aid. So given all of that, the best time for a traditional undergraduate student, to know about a scholarship is by April 1st of the year before. So as we're looking to go into spring, this really needs to be application season for your department. I realize this year especially is a challenge to make sure that you are continuing to engage with your students from afar. And as we hope to be more in person in the coming year, it's hard to know what that will look like. But your department knows best how to connect and how to get response from your students within your department. So being able to launch those scholarship applications with students early in the coming year, and to have deadlines then. So let's say if you use February as your application month, you can use March to align with to your actual selection. So you're gathering applications throughout February and looking into March to make your selection of students. March is when we have that Board of Trustees meeting that produces the annual budgets, and we get all of the information together to know how much is in those department scholarships, how much is in those endowed scholarships from accounting. So we can have all of that information. You don't have to wait for that total in order to have applications coming through. So you could have your pool of applicants, and then once you have your amount to spend in March, then you can put those pieces together and communicate that information out to the student and to our office by April 1st. At that point, then we can go through all the processes that are needed to add that onto a student's financial aid awards that are already existing, and to communicate that out to the student well in advance of what they would need to set up for the upcoming fall spring. So really that is our goal, to be able to have as much information upfront as possible. Just as a point of perspective, with right now, we just sent out our financial aid offers for our incoming class of 21, 22 students. So they're starting in August, and they're getting their initial information for these new students coming in December. So that's a solid 8 months ahead of time, all in the name really of getting them the most information upfront as possible. And I realize that these scholarships specifically that we're discussing in these trainings don't apply to first year students generally. This is the idea of being able to plan ahead really helps the students to feel comfortable in returning for the next year. So having that information ahead of time is a great benefit to the student. So that was the traditional undergraduate timeline. Very similarly, we want to make sure that those of the GPS, with all the different programs on the GPS campuses, it's not quite as cut and dry as looking for a specific month to have the deadline. But the concept is the same, of trying to get out ahead of what the in-class or the return class is. So the timelines of the GPS programs go a lot faster. And as far as both on the admission side of bringing in new students and on the frequency of continuing on to new terms. So as we look at applications for scholarships for the GPS programs, applications that are really completed 60 days before the start of the term would be ideal. And with that selection, at least 30 days before the start of the term. That doesn't give the financial aid team a lot of time to put that together, but we understand that there are less scholarships often in the GPS areas, but still some certainly significant ones. So we want to make sure that we are helping to prepare the GPS programs as well, and the GPS students with the information that they need to make a good decision for how they're paying for their terms. So it's the same type of thing where late awards can often interact with existing aid or come through after the bills are already due. So these timelines reflect that need, that necessity to have this information before the student actually needs to know what kind of payments that they are making before payment late fees and registration holds come on. We have these things done 60 days, applications done 60 days before the start of that student's term or the next term that we're rolling into, whatever term you're looking at to make that award of the scholarship. And the selection at least 30 days before the start of that term, that should help get them at least into the process so that when their bill is due, they would have that information with them ahead of time. Thank you again for following along with me, and Look forward to your questions at the end of the presentation.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Burgum. I'm the Director of Financial.
Sorry, Jim.
and in the-
Gonna skip you.
Figure out which numbers actually. And I believe we're moving on to the next
There we
section
go.
now. So that's it. Bye.
Hi, I'm Marlon Ganesa, Administrative Financial Aid Officer at Student Financial Services, and I'm here to share with you the scholarship notification code doc. And share my screen here in a bit. And so that's not what I want to share yet. Okay, so scholarship notification doc, and this couple intros for our staff. Molly Porter is our Senior Director of Student Financial Services. Jamie Ashley is our Director of Financial Aid. Randall Reed is our Associate Director of Financial Aid. And then we will be mostly in contact with Eva Wilson, our Financial Aid Specialist, aka Scholarship Specialist, and myself. And since we are doing most of the awarding for the departments. And so this school doc is mostly as an offered effort between department and SFS in order to award students a scholarship. SFS creates it. We notify the department. The department awards the student a scholarship, and in an ideal, perfect world, SFS adds the scholarship onto the student's aid. So the department Google Doc, and I'm using University Advancements Google Doc. The numbers I have in there right now are from 2021 actually. But so at the bottom of the Google Doc, you will find student selection, the list, and criteria. So here, and then let me show you what it looks like. So here you have the student selection, list, and go back. So the first tab is student selection. This is where the department awards student scholarship. You'll find the ID, the last name, first name, the account number, and the fund code, and the total per student, department comments, and SFS comments. So here, this totals the amount of each student per row for each student being awarded. We want you to use one row per student, even if they have multiple scholarships. So we shouldn't have duplicate rows of the same student, because you're going to make that award for that student in that same row that you enter the student. And then department code, comments, we're dating and identifying who's making the comment. And then if you're making additional comments later or calling attention to a comment, you probably want to use that alt enter to make a space in between comments. That way it's easier to view. And of course, SFS comments. At the top of the Google Doc for that tab, I put in a financially required. So when you see a Y, a yes, that scholarship in that column requires financial need. And in order to determine financial need, a student has to submit a FAFSA, which is a free application for federal student aid for that applicable academic year. So here, find the top row. So to the next one. So at the bottom, you're going to find totals. Total of the awards for those scholarships for that department. Let's see here. So we're doing the fund total. This row total, each column has a different amount. It will total all these amounts here. It'll total all that is awarded, and then the balance. And the balance should never be a negative amount. That means the fund has been over awarded. And I probably need to find out where that comes from. So, and then SFS has notification rules set up where when a change is made, on a Google Doc, it notifies us when that has been made. So that could be helpful for you as well, or for whomever is awarding or in here. So you could probably do that in tools, or you can do it in tools and then go to notification rules, and then you could set up however you want to be notified of any changes. And then, so the next tab is the list tab, and this is basically a list of all the department scholarships, all the amounts, what has been awarded, and the balances. So, and then I show you that. And I'll show you a list, and then this will total everything. So if you have more than one, obviously it's going to be to see that. And then let's see here. The criteria tab. So we get the criteria, it gets derived from the funds contract. Each department should have a copy of the criteria for each of their scholarships. And actually University Advancement has helped us in attaching a copy of the contract and the details of the fund in Workday. So if you go to Workday, here it is. So I will check. If you go to attachments for that scholarship, it'll, and then attachments has the contract image. So voila, there it is. I'll show you. Try to make it easy and just have it there as a tab on the Google Doc itself. And so that's what we have there. And then again, from the criteria tab, we have financial need required. So let me go there, go here. So like you saw here in the student selection tab at the top, I mimicked that in the criteria on the right. So whenever a scholarship requires, must demonstrate financial aid, I put a Y in that financial need required. And again, that's only determined when a student submits a FAFSA. And so when some criteria says must, it's not really a suggestion, it's a requirement. And so that's all for that one. And oops, last thoughts. When we're making comments, again, try to data and identify who is making a comment. That saves time if we have questions. And then again, when you're making a comment at a later date on drawing attention to something, just ensure at the same time and make a space between comments. That's way it's easier to view between comments. Entering a student's information and scholarship amount does not necessarily guarantee SFS is able to award it, because it depends. As our motto in financial aid, we double check the criteria. If it's in the contract, we're not trying, and our effort is not to not award a student an award. It's really to honor the donor's request and what they requested for that endowed scholarship. And we also check if it fits within the student's need, their aid, whatever aid has been awarded, or what we are anticipating from that student. We might have VA, yellow ribbon, outside scholarships with additional criteria, their budget, and then there's other federal, state, and institutional issues that we need to comply with. And so our lastly, I think it is safe to say that we are all here to help the students, and we recognize that departments might have the closest contact to the student. And so we ask if you see that a student is struggling, or let us know, or better yet, just let them have them contact us so we can see how we can help them. So I think that's it. What I have for now. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. And
hello, everyone. I'm William Burfitt from the Office of University Advancement, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about how endowments work and really the importance of making sure that we are properly stewarding our donors who have created endowments. And, I just wanted to start off with this first slide and, how can we partner with you? We're here to work with you in any way we can to help ensure that our donors are properly stewarded and thanked in a timely manner. And so if there's any questions we can ever answer, certainly please always know we're here to work with you. So briefly, I before I get started, I just wanted to share kind of the mechanics behind how an endowment functions. For easy math, let's say someone gives $100,000, so they give this $100,000 contribution, and it essentially goes into an endowment fund. And of course, it's invested. And here at Point Loma Nazarene, we work with our finance department and with an outside firm. They help ultimately determine typically what on a yearly basis that $100,000 will create or spin off or generate. And typically here it's 4%. So every year that $100,000 will typically generate $4,000 that can then be ultimately awarded as a scholarship to support students. So that's basic mechanics behind an endowment. Of course, there's fees that come out, but ultimately we have that 4% that we're able to award as a scholarship. And today, I just wanted to take you through a donor story to share with you the impact, but also the implications of good stewardship versus bad stewardship. Of course, we always want to make our donors feel appreciated for their acts of generosity. We always want to make sure they're being updated on how their gifts was used or continues to be used in perpetuity and really what that impact is. Really, ultimately, our goal is to make PLNU their favorite charity. So how do we do that? We want to make sure we're in constant communication and making sure there's transparency, but really just helping to provide updates. And of course, we want to ensure that the scholarship is awarded, which ultimately will lead to future gifts, another large gift or another type of planned or deferred gift. So I wanted to walk through a story about Mr. Smith, and his name has been changed here. We have several Mr. Smiths, and I wanted just to illustrate the impact of what an endowed scholarship can do and some of the hard work that goes into cultivating the relationship with the donor, but also stewarding that relationship with the donor. So about 9 years ago, Mr. Smith created his first endowed scholarship. And right away, we, through our development office, worked very closely with him to make sure he felt that his philanthropic investment was doing what he wanted it to do. And so how did we share with him updates? Well, we provided him stewardship reports, impact reports, basically sharing, what did his gift do? How did it help a student? What was, the student's kind of interest in college, et cetera. And through this great work and through the impact that we were able to share with him, he subsequently created 3 more endowed scholarships. So from this one scholarship and through ultimately timely cultivation, timely stewardship, he created 3 more. And so this kind of multiplies with all of our donors when they see the impact that their generous gifts have made. They typically will want to give more. And so in this case, he decided to make 3 more endowed scholarships. And this is typical for a lot of our donors that have created multiple endowed scholarships. It's really important to remember that if we don't steward our donors, they're not going to be happy with us. They're going to typically walk away. They may never even give another gift to the university. So first and foremost, we have with our donors a signed gift agreement that acts as a legally binding contract. We need to fulfill our promise to the donor. And typically, we in the gift agreement will provide some language in there that says we will give you an annual report with the impact your gift has made. So again, making sure that we're partnering with all of you to make sure we're getting that information back to our donors is so critical. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure we keep the donor happy. We could lose out on potentially future gifts, hundreds of thousands, potentially even millions of dollars. And also, of course, lots of our donors are alumni, and they will share their experiences with each other about how how did we do? How did the advancement office at PLNU steward their gift? How did they provide updates? Did they provide updates, et cetera? So we always want to make sure that our donors are having a positive experience. And of course, let's talk about the student impact. We all know that there's such a high demand for student scholarships, and it of course can help lessen the impact of tuition, which is really critical. Students are very concerned about that. And it also it allows students to have more time to focus on their studies. I think certainly it could be the difference between having one job versus two jobs, or not even having a job at all. And so when we don't award, it's one less student who doesn't receive a scholarship. So that's another critical piece. And I think lastly, oftentimes students, when they receive scholarships, will want to kind of pay it forward and ultimately give back to the university. And so through this scholarship, from a philanthropic context, this can help actually teach our young alumni to be philanthropists and want to give back to the university when they themselves have been awarded such a generous scholarship. So I just wanted to close with a couple of takeaways. First and foremost, it is so critical that we award each and every scholarship. We want to, again, ensure that we're providing updates back to our donors and letting them know that their funds were actually used in a way that they had requested. And of course, not awarding can severely impact future gifts. It can be the make or break between a large gift or no gift at all. And so again, I think the last takeaway here is we would really enjoy the opportunity to partner with you in any way that we can. If there's any questions you have, or if you're having any difficulties finding a student that matches the scholarship criteria, please let us know. We'd certainly love to work with you to ensure that we're able to complete everything we told the donor that we could do. Thank you.
All right. There's a bit of a Q&A at the end of that, but I think we can have our own Q&A. A lot of good information in there. I did want to share that along with what Marlon shared, we do have access to all of those different scholarship notifications. So those are all on the shared, they're all shared sheets. So there's a whole Google Drive folder for scholarship notifications that is separated out by academic year. So those are available to each of you. If we have questions that come up, like wondering about if their department scholarship is coming through yet, or there's some ways that we can go in and check and see what's there, and if there's any notes or anything that's holding it up. Usually if there's something holding it up, there'd be a comment in PowerFates as well, but it's good to know the resources that we have. Are there any questions overall about the scholarship process or about anything in the presentation?
I think one of the biggest things we can help out with, guys, is, and I hope you saw at the end, the importance of the student thanking the donor, kind of acknowledging. No one wants to give out of their heart and then not be acknowledged for it. So any of those things that we can help advancement get back quickly and timely, it's just going to make it easier for the advancement office to then go back and keep doing their work to get donors to help our students. So we definitely have a role in this, even though sometimes it feels like we're just kind of a middleman. We do want to partner with them. So any other questions?
One of the questions that came after that was a recommendation that we put a message in with either our aid offers or on NetPartner for anyone who does have an endowed scholarship or department scholarship to fill out the thank you. And they have for all those ones, they have a link that the student can just pop into and complete something real quick. Very thoughtfully, of course. And so we're looking into getting that set up so that it'll be an easier access for students as well.
And the students, we know they are thankful. They're just busy. So whatever we can do to make it easier for them is great. So yeah, hopefully we'll get that set up pretty soon.
I agree. I think a lot of students don't necessarily understand what an endowed scholarship actually means, and that someone has created this fund to donate to students, and that it is polite and the etiquette would be to thank the donor. I think they just assume it's something from our office. So maybe that's something to think about too when we're communicating about the name scholarship. And I don't know if this pertains to department scholarships, like the ones our actual departments are overseeing, like the field of studies. If we kind of communicate that along their way of making that a little more explicit of like, these are donor-based scholarships, and maybe introduce the idea of putting in a thank you letter or saying like, just if you are awarded, I don't know, we can figure out and
Yeah.
make that language a little more clear, but that might be nice to really help students understand, like, people have given money, raised money, whatever it is for you, and taken an investment, seeing the beauty of your work, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, totally good point. I know I didn't know what endowed meant when I first started here, and I only figured it out like 15 minutes ago, so just kidding. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions or points to make, I think we'll give you back a few minutes of your Friday. Thank you guys all for being here bright and early on this Friday, and have a great day and a great weekend.
Thanks
so
and I
much.
just put into the chat the links to the slide of this presentation and then the link to the recording, though this is also recorded, so you'll have that.
Do you think you can email that to us too, Daniel?
I can indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel.
Bye, kids.
Bye.